Alright, next, let's assemble the kelson. The kelson consists of 4 parts, and you can assemble them in a sequence following the joints. Overall, it's relatively simple. Sand both the upper and lower sides, because it might be challenging to sand them once they are on the ship. Remove all the carbon black, and then we can proceed to attach it to the ship. The specific location on the ship can be found in the drawings. There should be an indication in the middle of a drawing about where it should be placed. It's challenging to describe precisely. Just position it according to the corresponding location on the drawing and then glue it. If possible, you can use wood glue for a stronger bond. However, if you don't want to use wood glue, instant glue should work as well. Alright, the kelson is now in place. Next, let's discuss the construction of the stern. For the stern construction, we'll need some template parts that you can find on the plywood sheet. Check the manual for specific part numbers. There are also some other pieces, some need to be installed, such as these, while others can be used as aids for constructing the stern, like this one. First, let's install the stern components, namely B1, B2, and B3, which are on the plywood sheet. Find these parts on the plywood sheet and insert them into the slots. The sequence is from the inside to the outside, namely B1 to B3. On this side, it's B1, B2, B3. Pay attention to the slots, they are slightly wider. You can choose either side, the crucial part is to align it to one side, ensuring the correct horizontal position. Regarding the angle, try to follow the angle indicated by the slot because the slot itself has a slant in that's being cut. We want to comply with this slant to ensure that our stern post fits better onto this template. It has an overall tendency to angle inward. Let me show you, it generally angles inward like this. Once they are in place, apply glue, and we can proceed to the next step. After the installation of this template is complete, we can proceed to directly install the counter timbers. Regarding this template, I have to add a bit there because my keel was not being correctly placed, so it's hard for the counter timbers to be supported on at a right angle. You shouldn't encounter this issue. If you do encounter this problem, you can simply add a piece at the back, but generally, this issue shouldn't arise. There are 2 methods of assembly. One method is to follow the 3D instructions. According to that manual, start by placing these 2 parts, which are component C. From inside to outside, they are labeled ABC, with A on the inside and C on the outside. The manual suggests placing the ladder-shaped plywood template in the middle, then attaching the 2-part C to the transom on both sides to determine the distance in the middle. Afterwards, based on these templates and components, determine the specific spacing. This is one approach, which is relatively simple and easy, so I won't demonstrate it in the video. Next, let's discuss another method. Compared to the first method, the accuracy of the second method may be slightly higher in my opinion. However, there won't be a very significant difference, and it might be a bit more time-consuming. So, if you prefer a simpler approach, just follow the instructions in the manual, which is straightforward. The slightly more complex method involves first attaching the 2 counter timbers in the middle. After attaching the 2-part A in the middle, apply a small amount of glue on both sides of the template, and then place it in the middle. In this case, the distance can be achieved accurately. Since this part needs to be fitted onto the template in the end, you can sand the template, and then place it on the taffrail. Check if the width is approximately correct, if so, it's good. Because the sides of the block may be slightly wider if not sanded, so a bit sanding of this template block may be required. Also, the counter timber may be slightly wider, which you can have a check. Therefore, the sides of the template blocks need a bit of sanding. This is the basic logic of the assembly. Next, I'll attach the 2 counter timbers in the middle and then demonstrate how the assembly is done. Before attaching, you may notice that after placing the counter timbers, it may not fit well with the transom. The bottom surface may not align perfectly with the transom. In this case, you may need to slightly adjust and sand the bottom surface for better alignment with the transom, while allowing the counter timbers to be supported onto the template. That's roughly the process. Alright, now these 5 pieces are already attached. The logic of attaching them is quite simple. First, glue them in place. After gluing the adjacent two pieces, place the template spacer in the middle. On both sides of the spacer, you can apply a small amount of glue, not too much, just a bit. This makes it easier to remove later. The bonding strength of the layer board is not as strong as some other types of wood, so it won't be hard removing. But anyway, just apply a small amount of glue and gap the two counter timbers in the middle. And for the side counter timber, you need to glue two pieces together. After that, sand the bottom edge and attach it here. Once attached, also place a template spacer in the middle. This is just an overview of the process. Essentially, it's similar to the previous steps, so this would be a demonstration of how to make all those. After applying glue underneath, pay attention to the tail end. Make sure that the tail end aligns with the outer contour, especially at these corners and turns. This alignment ensures that the position won't sink in. Once in the correct position, glue it together. After gluing, the angle might be slight off, use a spacer to correct it. Alright, so after finishing the outermost two pieces, we can move on to installing this, which is the quarterdeck transom. For this transom, we need to pre-bend it at an angle similar to that of the template, approximately like this. After the pre-bending, we can place it on the stern. Ideally, it should fit just right on the upper edge of the spacers we placed earlier. The height of these spacers, I'll explain, should align with the transition point here. Let me show you with this sheet. It should align with this transition point. It's divided into three sections, one at the bottom, one in the middle, and one at the top. The spacer should align with the upper edge of the middle section where the transition occurs. It should look something like this. In this situation, we can set a height for this piece, the quarterdeck transom. Before attaching it, remember to sand the slope in advance according to the sanding line. Although there might be some minor adjustments needed after attaching it, it's still important to have it roughly prepared. Okay, now let's attach it onto the counter timbers. Now, when attaching it, make sure it remains as horizontal as possible. As you can see, it is currently in a horizontal position. If it's tilted, it won't be correct. Currently, it's almost level with the upper edge. Mine might be slightly off due to installation, but it should be roughly level with the upper edge. The two sides might not align perfectly due to some angle issues, but it's close. This may also depend on the angle you bent the transom, but it's not a big deal. Even if the bending angle is slightly off, it won't have a significant impact. Once the position is confirmed, we can glue this piece in place, and then the position for the counter timbers are essentially fixed. Alright, after completing the installation of the counter timbers, you can remove the rear part supports if you find them obstructive. However, make sure to leave two parts, as it helps maintain stability during construction, otherwise, the structure may tip backward, posing a safety risk. If conditions allow, you can keep all the parts in place. Next, install H2 here. Regarding H2, there isn't much to mention, simply apply glue and insert it, there shouldn't be any issues. Moving on, we need to sand both the outer and inner shapes. If you find it challenging to sand, you can remove the part, insert a sanding strip or sandpaper from the open space, and sand it more easily. Sand the outer contour, smoothing out the lines, and ensure that it aligns smoothly with the overall trend of the hull. Currently, I've already sanded one side. After sanding, the exterior should look smooth, like this. The surface is generally smooth, including the bottom. There are some glue marks from the earlier application, which will be sanded again later. Now, let me show you the rear part. The overall shape of the stern has a slight concave indentation, forming a C-shape with a curvature. The top is mostly straight, but it curves inward slightly. The bottom is wider, narrowing towards the top, and curving inward. On the other side, without sanding, you can make a comparison. Essentially, sand it smooth, and on this side as well, we will sand it and then showcase the result. Alright, so now I've also finished sanding the other side. Let me show you the result of the stern after sanding. You can also sand the overall surface. I haven't done it yet. We can use this taffrel for comparison. If the positions match, it indicates that you've done it correctly. You can see that both sides are not exposed, and the top and middle columns are aligned. In this situation, it's considered correct, and we can proceed to the next part. Now, let's prepare the parts needed for the filler frames. These are on sheet E numbered from 6 to 10. You can match each one to the corresponding number according to the instructions. You can also place them on the drawing and align them. There might be a slight difference in thickness, but it's generally the same. After preparing these parts, we can start sanding. First, let's sand the bottom surface, which has a sanding line. However, this sanding line may not be entirely accurate, so you need to make slight adjustments based on the actual installation on the ship. As you can see, I've already made the adjustments, and the lower part fits well along the upper edge of the counter timbers. In this situation, it indicates that the sanding is in good condition on the mating surface, and we can proceed to the gluing step. But before gluing, we need to sand the top and bottom surfaces because you won't be able to reach them after gluing. So, sand them and then proceed with the gluing process. Okay, so the first one has been attached. We ensured that both the inner and outer sides are relatively smooth. Afterward, we will perform a more detailed sanding on the outer side. Once this is completed, we'll work on the doorway leading to the stern galley. The door frame has two parts, one on the top and one on the bottom, with sanding lines on them. We'll sand these parts to ensure a good fit. At the same time, we need to ensure that it maintains a horizontal position with the ship's body. If it's tilted or not horizontal, it won't be correct. After ensuring it's in a horizontal position, we can glue it in place. Once glued, we can measure the height on the drawing and attach the upper part of the door frame at the measured height. After that, we'll glue the rear part of the door frame. The bottom needs a bit of sanding, and then we'll glue it. After completing these steps, I'll give you a demonstration. Alright, I've already installed the door frame here, along with the rear frame and the upper part. The upper part is relatively simple, just sand the bottom according to the sanding lines and place it along the upper edge of the door frame. For the two rear parts, do the same, sanding according to the lines. The sanding line for the last frame is divided into two angles, one at the bottom and one at the top. It's not a straight slope because, on the other side, you can see that it's divided into two angles with a turning point in the middle. On this side, just look and sand accordingly. The sanding line is just a reference, but the specific operation requires more trial fitting and adjusting. Now, let's assemble these two parts. Alright, now I have already installed the two rear frames, and I've added a spacer block here. You can use any scrap corner material as a spacer. Of course, a more formal way to fill the spacer is to completely fill the triangle area. However, since most people would fit planking, this area will not be visible. But if you are pursuing extreme authenticity, you can choose not to add this spacer block. That's one method. The second method is to completely fill the triangle. However, the first method may lead to a less stable overall structure, so you need to be very careful during sanding. The second method can be more complicated, but it depends on your personal choice. Next, we can proceed with sanding. We'll sand both the inner and outer sides, making the line smoother. We'll also remove the excess carbon black, like on this side. You can see that the outer side here is now smooth, and the inner side has been sanded as well. We'll do the same on this side, and after I finish sanding, I'll give you a final demonstration. Alright, after sanding, we have completed this side. Let me show you the final look of the completed project, including the sanded inner side. Both sides, the curves at the bottom and the internal lines are now smooth, achieving this appearance. The stern is essentially complete, and next, we can start working on the orlop.